Ecclesiastes, Song of Songs, the other writings of Solomon after Proverbs last week. And let's jump in. We're going to start with the book of Ecclesiastes, page 61 in your workbooks. Are you ready to go? Let's read the top. Both of the books we're studying in this lesson have been written by Solomon. Shulamon. One was written in his old age, and the other was written when he was a very young man. So these books will teach us that the very wise men fail in their pursuits of righteousness, even wise. Okay, in this lesson we'll learn what happened to Solomon in his life. We'll study his wisdom, and hopefully we'll be able to learn from his mistakes. When I was in Israel, there were different people named Shlomo. I just thought that was the funniest name, Shlomo. What's Shlomo? Turns out it's short for Solomon. Still today. Shlomo. Okay, wow. So we're going to look at Solomon some more here tonight. The questions, are you ready? Just shout out the answers here. What do you see as the theme of Ecclesiastes? As you read it, what's the theme?
Be good, God will bring you under judgment.
If you're good?
No, be good.
Be good, or God will bring you under judgment. Okay, what else? The purpose of life.
Earthly things do not provide fulfillment.
Earthly things do not provide fulfillment. Okay, good. Thank you, everybody. Number 2, Ecclesiastes 2:4-9. What had Solomon tried in his lifetime? I left one out.
Your mic is not on.
Mic's not on.
Yeah.
It is turned on.
Yep, go ahead.
1, 2, 3. Okay, is it recording? I can start over.
No, it is.
Okay. Oh, there you go. There's a little more. All right, number 2. According to Ecclesiastes 2:4-9, what had Solomon tried in his lifetime? The answer is everything. That's right. He had the money to do it. He had the power, the authority to do it, and he did. Number 3. What do you think Ecclesiastes 7:18 means?
Wise to practice moderation.
Wise to practice moderation. Yep. What else?
Trust God, it's not finished yet.
Trust God, it's not finished yet. I love that. Okay, these are good. Number 4, what is Solomon describing in Ecclesiastes 12, the first 5 verses? What do you think? Our future? Anybody else?
I think it is a person dying.
A person dying? Yep. Okay. Somebody else?
His regret.
His regret? Yeah. Maybe all the above. Okay, number 5. What do you find odd in Solomon's description of his lover in chapter 7? Pardon? Yes, he calls her his sister, but she's not. That's just how close he sees her.
He likes to compare his love for animals and food.
He likes to compare his love for animals and food.
From his lover to animals.
His lover to animals and food. Yes. Yes, he does. Yes, he does. It's true. Did all of you, we're not there yet, but did all of you read the white pages I sent home with you? Okay. Enough said. All right. She's delicious, he would say. Yes. All right, let's move on. The book of Ecclesiastes. Let's start with Ecclesiastes. Then after the break, we'll look at Song of Songs. Okay, a couple things about it. Ready? Number 1, in your notes. While Proverbs is wisdom explained, Ecclesiastes is wisdom experienced. All right? Solomon explains wisdom as he looks at the book of Proverbs, and all his observations on things we saw last week, all these truisms about life. But now here, he's lived it. He's lived it out, and he's at the end of his life, and he's looking back, and he's trying to say what he experienced with all of those things, okay? How did he use his life, and how he looks back on it, shares his experiences with his readers. Number 2, it's a book of struggle. It's a book of struggle. Okay? Struggle. And yet the key word here is meaningless. Meaningless, meaningless. Now, you'd think that the wisest man who ever lived would have a book at the end of his life about how easy life was. All this money, anything he could do, all the authority, snaps his fingers and it happens. But no, it's a struggle for him. I don't think it was a struggle for him to eat and drink and find pleasure and stuff. The struggle was to find meaning, to make sense of it all. Don't you think, as you've read it? All right? Instead we've got a book that's a book of struggle, heartache, frustration from an older king who's gone in a foolish direction even though he had great wisdom. So he uses this word meaningless over and over and over again, saying that that's what he finds life is all about. Well, yeah, because he had turned his back on God along the way, and without God, life is meaningless, right? You live, you die, it's over, big deal. With God, there's purpose and meaning, for sure. Now, third is the story of Solomon trying to find purpose apart from God. Okay, apart from God. Throughout this book, Solomon tells us what he's tried, and really, he's tried everything. He's tried to find purpose in life without God, and as we learn in the book, there is no purpose for life unless it is to serve God and to fulfill the reason he's made you. So there are 3 repeating phrases in the book we see over and over that kind of flesh this out. The first one is this: life is meaningless. Yes! Over and over. 34 times in this short little book, 34 times, he says things like here in the very second verse, meaningless, meaningless, says the teacher. By the word teacher in Hebrew is koheleth, and he calls himself that a number of times throughout the book. That he's old enough that he's teaching you what you need to know. Meaningless, meaningless, says the teacher. Utterly meaningless. Everything is meaningless. Wow, what an uplifting book. When you're down, you don't want to read Ecclesiastes. Just bring you down even more. Okay, all right, so the second one is there's nothing new under the sun. Now that's something that you would say if you were just plain bored, right? And he's tried everything, and it's not meaningful to him, so he's bored. Nothing's new under the sun. Look at verse 9 of chapter 1. What has been will be again. You got to say it like Eeyore. Yeah, Eeyore. What has been will be again. What has been done will be done again. There's nothing new under the sun. Thanks for noticing me. That's Eeyore, right? 29 times he says that phrase. There's just nothing new under the sun. What seems new, it's been done before. It's all happened before. There's nothing new. And again, when you're an old man, then you might start thinking that because this is the same old, same old. Somebody think, look at that, this is new. Nope, been done. Got the t-shirt, been there, done that. Nope. And then the third one, a chasing after the wind. Now this kind of describes meaninglessness. Like it's just chasing after the wind. 7 times in the book, and starting here in chapter 1, verse 14, he says, I've seen all the things that are done under the sun. All of them are meaningless, a chasing after the wind. You can't catch the wind. I mean, you can maybe harness it in a sail or something like that. You can't catch it, bottle it up or anything. And he says, life is like that. There's no meaning for me. I don't see any meaning. I'm just bored. It's pointless like chasing after the wind. All right. Crazy, crazy stuff. You'd think the wisest man ever, but when he's turned his back on God, here's where he ends up. All right, the box at the bottom of the page. Who's the author of this book? Solomon. And again, he calls himself the teacher. Right in the first chapter, we see verse 1, 12, 16. Let me read them. He says, these are the words of the teacher, Koheleth, son of David, king in Jerusalem. Wow. Who's the son of David who's king in Jerusalem? Only Solomon. He's the only guy. And then in verse 12, I, the Koheleth, the teacher, was king over Israel in Jerusalem. Again, narrowed down. In verse 16, and I thought to myself, look, I've grown and increased in wisdom more than anyone who has, what? Ruled in Jerusalem before me. I have experienced much of wisdom and knowledge. So here he is explaining it's him. So we see it's clearly Solomon who's writing this book. In the next box, who are the recipients? Well, all of Israel, but particularly Solomon's son. He's writing these things down in these books to show his son what life's all about. Wow, if I was his son, I would not be encouraged or feel especially edified by this stuff. So that's the recipients. The date would be about 930 BC. Solomon's older age, right? He's maybe 75 years old at this point. He sees death coming. Okay, this is maybe like 40 years after he wrote Song of Songs in his youth. And maybe 40 or 50 years even, perhaps. And yeah, and of course he wrote the Proverbs we looked at last week throughout his life over a long period of time. But this is near the end. All right? And the purpose of the book is to show a man who tries it all and still finds no meaning in life apart from God. He tries it all, which we've seen, and we will see more of that here in a moment. All right. You got that? That's a bit of a longer one. Okay, ready to go? All right, when you look at this book and you read it and you see all this meaningless, utterly meaningless, there's nothing new under the sun, you see that, you think, what is the book all about? What is the intention? And so over the years, scholars have basically boiled down to two things they think it could be about. Number one, that Solomon doesn't mean any of this. He's just playing the devil's advocate. You know that phrase, right? You take the other side just so that somebody's taking the other side. You might not believe it, but just so that you can have a debate, somebody needs to take the other side. And so that's what Solomon's doing. He doesn't believe this, that all life is meaningless, chasing after the wind. He doesn't believe this, but he wants to set it up so that people can see what the other side may look like if you don't follow God. So that's one view that some people have. And the other view is that this is real. This is the story of his life. That when he got to the end of his life, he was afraid of dying. He watched his body falling apart. When we get to chapter 12, we'll see that. He was afraid that no one would remember him. And so in life, without God, as he turns back on God, allowed these wives to bring in their idols, allowed them to set up altars even in Jerusalem. This turned him back. Okay. All right, if you're watching this one this year, we missed the first little bit. We had a technical issue, so go back at the end of the description. There will be a link where you can go back to the first 15 minutes that got missed, and then come back here and watch the rest that's live here tonight. All right, so we have talked a little bit about the book of Ecclesiastes already, some general thoughts about what it is, the author and the recipients, the date, the purpose, so just introductory stuff. And then we're looking at how there's two views of Ecclesiastes that scholars have. Now, the first view is this, that Solomon's simply playing the devil's advocate. He doesn't believe any of this stuff, that life is really meaningless, that it's all just chasing after the wind, all that stuff. Doesn't really believe that stuff, but, sometimes you're having a debate and somebody will take the other side just so that they don't believe it, but you got to have somebody playing the devil's advocate. So some people would say that's what Solomon's doing. He knows, he's wise, he really knows what life's all about for sure, but he's just setting this up so that people could read it and be challenged, that this is what could happen if you turn from God. The problem is, we know that he did turn from God. All of the different wives he allowed to bring in their idols and set up altars right there in Jerusalem. So the other view of Ecclesiastes is that it's the story of Solomon's life. It's reality. That's what happened to him. He had all this wisdom, but he turned away from God. He stopped looking to God, and life indeed became meaningless by the end. He searched for meaning in things and experiences and his own wisdom. We'll talk about all that in a moment. And of course, there's not meaning for life. That's not purpose for life in things. Agreed? And it's especially good to know when Christmas is coming, right? And so that's all true. All right, so let's go on here. By the way, in your notes, there's a little, no. Yeah, there's a little box. Ecclesiastes simply means assembly or gathering. Assembly or gathering. All right? As a matter of fact, our word Ecclesiastes, or that word Ecclesiastes, the word for church is ecclesia in Greek, which means to gather together, right? To be called out. And then you gather. So that's a gathering. And so that's a church. The word for church, ecclesia in Greek, comes from this same word, Ecclesiastes. So a gathering or an assembly. Okay, let's have a quick look at the outline of the book there, again on page 62. And it starts with a little introduction, the first 11 verses. So let's have a quick read of those, shall we? All right, here it is. It's a good overview in this introduction. He says, these are the words of the teacher, son of David, king of Jerusalem. Meaningless, meaningless, says the teacher. Utterly meaningless, everything is meaningless. What does man gain from all of his labor at which he toils under the sun? Generations come and generations go, but the earth remains forever. Remember, he's an old man and he's looking back in his life and it's going to end soon and like, wow, it just comes and goes. It's so fast, right? The sun rises, the sun sets, hurries back to where it rises. Everything is just ongoing. Nothing matters. The wind blows to the south and turns to the north. Round and round it goes, ever turning on its course. Wow. All streams flow into the sea, yet the sea is never full. To the place the streams come from, there they return again. Remember we saw in Job they knew about the cycles, right? All things are wearisome, more than one can say. Wow, not just bored, but he's just weary of everything, right? All things are wearisome. The eye never has enough of seeing, nor the ear its fill of hearing. What has been will be again. What has been done will be done again. There's nothing new under the sun. Is there something of which someone can say, look, there's something new? Now, it was here already, long ago. It was here before our time. There's no remembrance of men of old. Here it is. This is where it gets personal. There's no remembrance of men of old, and even those who are yet to come will not be remembered by those who follow. He's worried that he won't be remembered, but here we are 3,000 years later talking about him, reading his books, reading the things that he's written. But that's the introduction. It's a pretty good summary of the book and what's going on. So first, it's the introduction. Then the next section you could label, I've tried it all. I've tried it all. And he had the money to try it all. He had the authority as king, the resources. He could try it all indeed. Now, again, verse 12, the next verse after what we just read to chapter 2, verse 26, he lists all the things that he's tried. Let's look at a few of them. I think I've got them here. Yeah. So starting at verse 4 of chapter 2, little glimpse of it, right? I undertook great projects. I built houses for myself and planted vineyards. I made gardens and parks and planted all kinds of fruit trees in them. I made reservoirs to water groves of flourishing trees. I bought male and female slaves and had other slaves who were born in my house. I also owned more herds and flocks than anyone in Jerusalem before me. I amassed silver and gold for myself and the treasure of kings and provinces. I acquired men and women singers and a harem as well, the delights of the heart of man. Wow. Tried it all? Absolutely. Now remember, some of these things, are distasteful and totally wrong for us now, but that was life. That was the life of a wealthy person, back in that day. And indeed, up until a couple hundred years ago throughout Scripture. So there it is. He concludes, they haven't given him much satisfaction in life, though he's tried it all. It's all just, help me with the word, it's all just? Well, good for you. That's right. Meaningless. All right. Wait. Shall we read a little bit more? Yeah. I became greater by far than anyone in Jerusalem. This is from verse 9. In all this, my wisdom stayed with me. Really? Did it? I denied myself nothing my eyes desire. That's true. I refused my heart no pleasure. My heart took delight in all my work, and this was the reward for all my labor. Yet when I surveyed all that my hands had done and what I had toiled to achieve, I bet he never got his hands dirty, everything was meaningless, a chasing after the wind. Nothing was gained under the sun. Wow. So he tried it all, and here's the end. It's all just meaningless. Means nothing to me. Number 3, the next section in the outline of the book, chapters 3 to 5, kind of the biggest section here, is I've seen it all. Okay, I've tried it all. I've seen it all. Okay, here he says that he's seen just about everything it's possible to see or to observe, he says, and yet he finds very little of it is worthwhile. Now, you know this part, and you're going to sing it with me, aren't you? To everything turn, turn, right? There is a season. Turn, turn. Okay, some of you do remember the 1960s. Okay. There's a time for everything and a season for every activity under heaven. This is famous, very famous. A time to be born and a time to die, a time to plant and a time to uproot, a time to kill and a time to heal, a time to tear down and a time to build, a time to weep and a time to laugh, a time to mourn and a time to dance, a time to scatter stones and a time to gather them, a time to embrace and a time to refrain from embracing. And again, what was the name of that group that did that? To everything turn to. The Birds, right? Byrds, right? The Birds, yes. And I should have had it up here playing. But then, I actually, in other years I've done that, but because this is recording and going online, YouTube will shut you down if you play copyrighted material and stuff, so. Which is kind of too bad, because it's kind of fun to watch this black and white grainy video of these guys with their hair, from the late 60s and stuff. All right, but I mean, it's right from the Bible. It's Solomon, and this whole section, big section, is all about, he's seen it all. He's seen that there's a time for this and a time for that, okay? All the things that he has seen as you go through it. Tons of stuff. And then number 4, section 4, I've considered it all, okay? I have thought about it all. Now, this goes from chapters 8 to 12, and this is the place where he states that after trying everything and watching everything, that he found that thinking about things was just as meaningless, just as useless. In fact, he just concludes that it's all absolutely meaningless. Life is just a simple chasing after the wind. When I applied my mind to know wisdom and to observe man's labor on earth, this is chapter 8, verse 16, his eyes not seeing sleep day or night, then I saw all that God has done. No one can comprehend what goes on under the sun. You can't figure it out. Despite all his efforts to search it out, man cannot discover its meaning. Even if a wise man claims he knows, he cannot really comprehend it. Wow. And then the last section of this depressing book. The last section is the conclusion of the matter. All right, just the last part. This is the last half of chapter 12, the last chapter. And basically he says only 2 things matter: fear God and obey God. Fear and obey God. Now, I need to tell you, there is some question about whether Solomon actually wrote this last little piece, because all of this has been in the first person, right? I did this, I tried that, I thought about this, right? Are you with me? But this little epilogue at the end says, not only was the teacher wise, but also he imparted knowledge to the people. So what's that called? That's not first person, that's third person. That's someone else writing. So it may be that he wrote this last little bit, or it may be that someone else wrote it and tacked it on there. But it goes on to say, not only was he wise, but he imparted the knowledge to people. He pondered and searched out and set in order many proverbs. The teacher searched to find just the right words, and what he wrote was upright and true. The words of the wise are like goads, their collected sayings like firmly embedded nails given by one shepherd. Be warned, my son. So again, remember the recipients were all of Israel and his son. Be warned, my son, of anything in addition to them. to my words, my wise words. Of making, this was my, in Bible college, this was my life verse. Of making many books, there's no end, and much study wearies the body. My school verse. Much study wearies the body. But here's the end. Here's the end. And again, if Solomon is writing this, that would be wonderful. It says, now all has been heard. Here is the conclusion of the matter. What is it? Say it with me. Fear God and keep his commandments. For this is the whole duty of mankind. For God will bring every deed into judgment, including every hidden thing, whether it's good or evil. Wow. So I hope that was Solomon sort of coming around at the end and saying the ultimate thing is to fear God and keep his commandments. Yep.
When I read this thing, the whole book to me was all about chapter 12.
Yeah.
The first 11 chapters was pointing out, as you said earlier,
Yep.
that he had lost faith or following God. But then at the end, the whole chapter says, you should be follow God and remember your Creator.
Yep.
Which to me is the whole point.
Right.
Life was meaningless if you didn't. So
Yep.
when I read it,
Good.
I thought it was the main point of the whole
Yep.
book.
Okay, yeah. So for sure, if you're watching at home and you manage to navigate through and get here, it's easily read that this is Solomon walking through all these things. I tried this, I saw this, I experienced this, I thought about and considered all this stuff, and now the end is here. Here's the conclusion of the matter. Fear God. You want to find purpose. Everything else is meaningless. Without God, it's meaningless. So the final conclusion is to fear God and keep his commandments. That's the duty of mankind. God made you. What's your duty? How do you fulfill the purpose for which you're made? Fear God, keep his commandments. Okay. Very good. Thank you. All right. A couple of things. There are some unique passages in Ecclesiastes. Again, in your notes, these are here, and then there are a few more at the side on the left. A time for everything. Now, we already talked about that. From the birds. Okay, we already read that. Did we get to the whole thing? No, I don't think. A time to embrace, a time to refrain. That's where we left off before. A time to search and a time to give up. A time to keep and a time to throw away. Some people don't know that one. A time to tear and a time to mend. A time to be silent and a time to speak. A time to love and a time to hate. A time for war and a time for peace. He says, again, this is Solomon. Remember the Proverbs, this is what I've observed. This is in that section. I've seen it all, and I've observed that there's a time for everything. Okay? Good. So chapter 3, and you've heard that one before. Here's another amazing phrase from the book. It's on eternity in the hearts of men, okay, mankind. And it says, I don't know if it says 3 verse 9 in your book. It should be 3 verse 11. Okay, it's 9 to 11 actually. So every culture believes in an afterlife. Only more recently with, the atheists, they're saying, oh, there's nothing more. There's just what you see here. That's it. No. Throughout history, every culture around the world believes there's something more, something after this. And what does Solomon say 3,000 years ago? What does the worker gain from his toil? I've seen the burden God has laid on men. He has made everything beautiful in its time. He has also set eternity in the hearts of men, yet they cannot fathom what God has done from beginning to end. Okay, so God has placed eternity, the idea that there is more, there's something beyond this in the hearts of people. And that's why, again, throughout all of history of mankind and all over the world, people have always believed there's something more. How do you get to Valhalla or to Nirvana or whatever? How do you get there is the question, as they're trying to make it up. But everybody knows there's something more. Why? God has placed eternity in the hearts of people. Okay, here's another one. Another key phrase in here, or interesting phrase at least, unique passage, the dead lion. I'd rather be a dead lion, okay? I'd rather not. So what is he saying? So here's the verse, Ecclesiastes 9:4. Anyone who is among the living, now that's the key to it. Anyone who is among the living has hope, right? What's the phrase? Anybody on this side of the grass? That's has hope, right? Every day above ground is a... You heard these phrases? No? Okay. Anyone who is among the living has hope. Even a live dog is better off than a what? Dead lion. Okay. All over, what's the lion known? And it's not just, in Disney. The lion is the what? The king. The lion is the king of beasts. You see that from the Babylonians and the Assyrians and all over the place. The royal standards, the coat of the family coats, all that stuff. Lions are everywhere when there's royalty and kings. So what's he saying? He's saying, I'd rather be a young man without anything, right? I'd rather be alive and have nothing than to be an old, dying man who's the king. Now, what good does it do me to be king, right? If I'm dead tomorrow, what good? I'd rather be alive, and have nothing. At the funeral here last week, I quoted Queen Elizabeth I, back in the 1500s. Queen Elizabeth I is quoted as saying on her deathbed, I would give all I possess for a little more life. I'd give all I'd possess. Just have, another moment of life, something along that line. True. Wow. Yeah. Okay, so that's what Solomon is saying here. I'm old. I'd rather give up being king, an old king, than being a young nothing, if you would. This is an interesting phrase, too, for a man who has 700 wives. Plus, that would be part of the harem, yeah. Well, the harem he got from his dad. Wow. Okay, it's interesting to note the singular when Solomon says, enjoy life with the wife, singular, whom you love. Okay, so verse 9. Enjoy life with your wife, whom you love, all the days of this meaningless life. Well, you'd have hoped she would have spiced it up for him a little bit, right? And we're going to talk about her after our break because we read all about her, this wife of your youth. We're going to read about her when we get to the Song of Songs after our break, right? Enjoy life with your wife, whom you love, all the days of this meaningless life that God has given you under the sun, all your meaningless days, for this is your lot in life and in your toilsome labor under the sun. Yikes! That's so sad. But enjoy life with your wife, whom you love. So obviously he's talking about his first wife, not one he inherited, not one that he bartered. It was part of a treaty with some other city, state, nation, whatever. This is the one, and we're going to read all about this, a little later. He was truly and madly in love with this gal, and so he says, enjoy life with your wife, whom you love. So good to note. This one is puzzling. This next one is puzzling from chapter 10. An answer for everything. Is it really, or is it just, again, the way he had been twisted by the end? Okay, what does it say? A feast is made for laughter. Okay, yeah, agree with that. And wine makes life merry, but money is the answer for everything. What? Solomon? Now the problem is, So he had all the money in the world and he could buy his way out of or buy into or whatever, he could do that. The problem is he's got a problem. But most of us think if we just had a little more money, we wouldn't have problems. Right? Isn't that what we normally think? Oh, if I just had a little more money, I wouldn't have this pressure and I wouldn't. Yeah. But Solomon here, this is not a bit of wisdom from God to adopt. I just need more money. Money's the answer to everything. This just shows us how far Solomon has fallen, right? Okay, not wisdom for us to understand, but to understand how far Solomon had fallen here too. Who knows the phrase, the good old days? The good old days, yeah. Do not say, why were the old days better than these? Not wise to ask such questions, right? The good old days. Now this is down in the bottom left. There's a little, beside the dotted line. So the good old days right there, 7:10, that comes from Ecclesiastes. Here's another one from chapter 10, verse 1. Have you ever heard of the phrase, ooh, there's a fly in the ointment? A fly in the ointment. Yeah. As dead flies give perfume a bad smell, so a little folly outweighs wisdom and honor. You got this beautiful perfume, but there's this dead stinking fly messing up. And yeah, wow, you might have some wisdom and honor, but if you just go do something foolish, it's going to ruin it all. Just like the flies in the ointment, flies in the perfume, mess things up. Here's another familiar saying. A little birdie told me. You ever heard that one? Ooh, how'd you find that out? A little birdie told me, right? Do not revile the king, even in your thoughts, or curse the rich in your bedroom, because a bird of the air may carry your words, and a bird on the wing may report what you say. Today we would say what? Big Brother is watching, right? Be careful what you say. Don't revile the king, right? A little birdie told me. A bird on the wing may report what you say. Interesting, right? So many of these things, Now, some of them in the King James, this is the New International Version here. Some of them in the King James, have the fly in the ointment instead of, dead fly in the perfume, it says here. So that's where some of them come from. And here's another one which is not there. You might want to add this one at the bottom. Chapter 11, verse 1 talks about cast your bread upon the waters. Another phrase you may have heard somewhere throughout your life. Cast your bread upon the waters, says Solomon, for after many days you will find it again. It'll come back to you. I don't think that's, what goes around comes around. That's not what he's saying. But if you give, if you're generous, you'll be blessed back, is the idea there. All right? All right, let's turn to chapter 11 now. If you've got your Bible there, and I think this is where we're going to close and then take our break. Ecclesiastes 12. So you've been hearing me say that Solomon is old. He's afraid no one will remember him. He's not found any meaning, as he's not really looking to God for that meaning anymore, unless, what he says after this passage about fear God, keep his commandments. But look at this study of old age here as we walk through it. Okay, it's the first few verses of chapter 12. Ready? All right. Number 1, verse 1. He says, remember your Creator in the days of your youth. All right, that's great. Smart. Okay, when you're young, you need to remember God now. Don't wait till you're older. When you're young, remember God, days of youth, before, and here it comes. Before what? Before the days of trouble come, and the years approach when you will say, I find no pleasure in them. Okay, again, in your notes, like Solomon says he's finding no pleasure anymore, and it wouldn't be no pleasure in the joy of life, probably some sort of like intimate or sexual pleasure. He's just not finding joy anymore here in his old age, he says. Okay, again, remember your Creator in the days of your youth, before, so that's the premise to all of these. Verse 2, before the sun and the light and the moon and the stars grow dark. What do you think he's talking about there? He's losing his eyesight. Things are going dark. They're getting darker and darker, right? His eyesight is going. Not seeing the light anymore. The clouds return after the rain. So there was light, but now it's getting dimmer. It's getting cloudier. You can't see anything. So his eyesight is going, right? Verse 3. When the keepers of the house tremble and the strong men stoop. What do you think? The keepers of the house starting to tremble. The strong men stoop, like the bones. His bones are creaking. Some of us know what that's like every time we get up from a chair. Yeah, I'm to the point I really can't actually get up from a chair without making a noise of some sort. We'll stop there. Okay, when the keepers of the house tremble, those would be your bones, right, that hold your body together. And strong men stoop, you're just, bent over again so much. Then he goes on, still in verse 3, when the grinders cease because they are few. What would be the grinders? Your teeth. He's losing his teeth too, right? Grinders cease because they're few. And those looking through the windows grow dim. Again, that would be his eyesight once more. Those looking through the window grow dim. Just can't see very well. Like a foggy window you're looking through. I don't like this passage. It's just getting more more and more applicable. All right? Number 4, or verse 4, when the doors to the street are closed and the sound of grinding fades. What's that about? Your hearing. Like somebody, the door's open, you can hear it fine, but then you close the door and it's like, muffled anymore, right? The door to the street's closed, the sound of grinding fades. Again, his hearing is going bad as he gets older too. What? Yeah, exactly. All right, and he says, when men rise up at the sound of birds, but all their songs grow faint as well. All right, then verse 5, when men are afraid of heights and of dangers in the streets. Okay, what's he talking about? A couple things here with old age. The reference to a fear of heights, which again is common among older people. Like, I don't want to step on that chair. I don't want to climb that ladder. I don't want to, no. There's a fear of that. And then he says the dangers in the streets too. There's just an overwhelming fear. You've probably seen people, or as they've got older, they don't want to go out anymore. They're just like, I might get lost. I don't know what'll happen. Nope, I'm not going. I just don't want to leave the house anymore. And that's a sad thing too. But Solomon's experiencing all these things too. All right? He says, this is an interesting one. When the almond tree blossoms. And you see the picture there. That's the white blossom. So what's he talking about? Your hair is turning white. All right? Your hair is turning gray, white. Sometimes, like the leaves, it's falling out. When the almond tree blossoms, okay, your hair is turning white. And he says, next phrase is, and the grasshopper drags himself along. Now again, this is an old Hebrew phrase, 3,000 years old, and it's a little difficult to understand and interpret, but probably referring to, kind of the way you walk sometimes, when you get real old, start to lose some of the strength in your legs and just kind of pulling a leg along. And it's tough. And then he closes by saying, and desire is no longer stirred. Again, probably you're referring to some kind of intimacy. So this is what he fears as he gets old. What? Old age, body falling apart on him, death, and nobody will remember him. Yikes. And at that we say, hooray. No, it's sad. It's a sad story. And again, so glad that he does say the conclusion of the matter is what? Fear God, keep his commandments. All right. Now, people ask about the idea, so what happened to Solomon? I get asked this every time. Like, did Solomon go to heaven? Like, would he go to heaven? Or did he, how much did he turn his back on God? And the answer is, we don't know. We know he definitely turned away from God. We see all of this despair and stuff. So I copied this from a guy named Dick York, not the guy who played on Bewitched. Darren on Bewitched. This is a different guy who was a missionary. And he said this, what constitutes the falling away of which the Bible prophesies? The Bible says in the latter days, a lot of people will fall away. Okay, does it mean the loss of orthodoxy or the lessening of religion? Well, obviously that was not true in the case of Solomon. He did not retract his counsel nor cease to be religious. He just ceased to apply what God had taught him, according to Mr. York. He demonstrated more tolerance for freedom of religion, even to the point of participation in all of the wives' stuff, right? He exercised less resistance to the incursion of the enemy's devices and increasingly less sensitivity to his conscience. Corruption starts at the core. The label doesn't change. The outward appearance remains the same, but the motives change. Selfless worship of the Lord because he's worthy gradually changes to become an exercise that simply entertains me or makes me feel good about myself. Self begins to replace the true worship of a holy God. So will we see Solomon in heaven? I don't know. Only God sees the heart. True? Only God sees the heart. And that's a lot of cases. We can't really make proclamations. God knows God sees the heart. So, okay.
Brian,
Yes, questions?
the question I always have in my mind is there's no, like the song was I all along.
Yes.
Which to me is pride.
Yes.
There's no mention of confessing or asking God for forgiveness.
Yes.
That's what I see in
Yeah.
And what he did, we don't know.
Right. So June is saying, when you read through this book, as we just did, it's I. It's pride. It's all about him. He wasn't perfect for sure, because nobody is, but there's no place where he repents, where he asks for forgiveness at this case. So, I mean, we know early in life, he was committed to God, right? I mean, he's the guy who built the temple, right? So let's not lose sight of that. And boy, the dedication of the temple wasn't just, like a ribbon cutting. It was the most beautiful, wonderful, gigantic worship celebration you've ever seen. So this guy truly loved the Lord at the beginning, and only God knows, here at the end. Yep.
I still think the first verse of 12 is in fact him recognizing and admitting that he has fallen away from God, and that's what
Yeah.
he's basically saying. If you fall away from God, look at all the crap that
Yep.
you don't have a faith in.
Yes.
So he's actually saying it right there. Now, whether he actually asked for forgiveness or not, which is what the question was,
Right.
it doesn't say that in there. But to me, it's a complete recognition that life became meaningless because he moved away from God, and he's telling everyone, don't do it.
Yeah.
Well,
Yep.
be
Oh.
God-fearing in your youth, because look what you get.
Yep. So Jeff is saying here that the beginning of chapter 12, the first verse, remember your Creator in the days of your youth, is him recognizing how far he's drifted, and he's saying, everybody else, don't miss out.
Don't do what I did.
Don't do what I did. Exactly.
To me, that's what that
Yep.
is.
Yep, for sure. For sure. I love it. Okay. So basically, you got the one of two choices, right? Either life really is meaningless when you turn your back on God, or he's just playing the devil's advocate. Doesn't mean it, just wants to set up a little challenge for everybody. So, okay, let's take a break, 6 or 7 minutes, and come back, and we will look at the Song of Songs. All right, 1 minute. We'll restart in 1 minute. All right, are we ready? Okay, part 2 for tonight. The last of the poetical books that we're going to look at here in this section. Now, there is another Old Testament poetical book, but it's not collected with Job, Psalms, Proverbs, Ecclesiastes, Song of Songs. It's the book of Lamentations. It's all poetical. But because it was written by Jeremiah, it's stashed in there beside Jeremiah. So after Christmas, on the 10th, we will resume. We're going to take the next 2 Wednesdays off, and then on the 10th, we'll resume, and we'll have an introduction to Old Testament prophecy books, and we'll look at the book of Isaiah, and then on the 17th of January, we'll look at Jeremiah and the book of Lamentations, which is another poetical book. As Jeremiah sits there, the city's ruined, the Babylonians have destroyed God's temple, and he writes this lament, thus called the book of Lamentations, exactly. Okay, so there's that one too. So this is the last one we're going to look at tonight, and it's the Song of Songs, all right? Now, we looked at a kind of depressing book, meaningless. Now, this is more of an uplifting book, and if Ecclesiastes was written when he was like 70, 75, who knows, 80. This book, Song of Songs, was written maybe he's 20, maybe 18, maybe 25. He's much younger in this book too. So several things in your notes as we start. Number 1, this is one song. It's 8 chapters, but it is one song. Okay? A song written by Solomon. Now, even though 1 Kings 4:32 tells us that Solomon spoke 3,000 proverbs and his songs numbered 1,005, this is the Song of Songs. This is the epitome. This is the top one. And that's why we don't call it the Song of Solomon anymore, because we have 2 more in the Psalms and this one and 1,000 more. So it's the Song of Songs. It's one song. Number 2, it is sexually explicit. Now, I gave you the white sheets to take home last week and to read, or if you haven't read them yet, or you're just catching up tonight, do read these sheets. You can read them ahead of time, and I think you would get more out of it, but you can read them after you watch this lesson. Either way, it doesn't matter. But it goes through pretty much verse by verse what's happening. What is the setting? What's going on? In Oriental lands, what do these things mean? 3,000 years ago in the Hebrew lands, what did these things mean? Like there are rhyming words that, of course, we wouldn't get when you translate it into English, right? I mean, if there's 2 Hebrew words and I can't. And one word sounds like flower, or the word is flower, but it sounds like some other body part. We wouldn't get the rhyming, we wouldn't get the stuff in English, and so we lose a lot of it. That's why I wanted you to have that to read, to see all the way through, like verse after verse after verse. Like every 3rd verse has some double entendre in it, some rhyme, something, and there's a lot more going on very sexually explicit that you just don't get if you sit down and read through it in English. And then thirdly, its major purpose is as a song for Jewish weddings. Okay? It would be sung at a Jewish wedding. Maybe the whole thing, maybe parts of it. I've had people read I've had people in weddings that I've conducted read sections and snicker all the way through them as they thought that was hilarious to read some of this stuff in their wedding and all, and I just thought, nobody gets it. Anyway, but people, right? Okay, a couple more things. In your box there, the author is Solomon, okay? Again, Solomon, his young age, maybe early 20s, maybe 20 itself, or even 18. We don't know for sure, but they got married young back then. And this is his first wife, the wife of his youth, as we saw a few minutes ago. And so he's a young guy. Not uncommon for them to be married at 14 or 15 or 16. And the guys maybe a little older usually, but some that young too. So he is young. For sure. What else? Oh, by the way, backing up on the last one, how it's so sexually explicit. Back in the Middle Ages, this portion of the Bible, the Song of Songs, would be removed from the Bibles of priests, so it wouldn't stimulate them too much as they read it. So, okay, all right. It's a book of wedding songs, or it's a wedding song. And it's from Solomon. He's the author in his young age. The recipients are Israel, the people of Israel, as they have weddings and as they have their honeymoon nights, if you will. And the date is probably around 970 BC, 40, 50, maybe 60 years even before the book of Ecclesiastes. Again, depending on how young he was when he wrote this and how old he was when he wrote Ecclesiastes. So probably about 970 BC. For Solomon. All right, and what's the purpose of the book? All right, there are several possibilities, and these could be on a quiz someday. Oh, wow, wow. And wait a minute, did I mention that we're finishing up the poetry books tonight? So when we come back, it will be a whole new section, so it just may be that we would have a quiz on these poetry books when we come back. I don't know. That's a lie. But who knows? Who knows? Okay, you ready? So here are several possibilities for the purpose. Over the years, people have suggested these purposes, and some are silly, but people have totally believed these things. Okay, number one, people have suggested that this book is explaining marital love, explaining sex between a husband and wife. It's clearly in the proper context. It's clearly approved by God. There is nothing terrible or wrong or nothing at all. This is great. This is a husband and a wife on their honeymoon and other times, in this book, and that's what it's about. Okay, so again, if you read those white pages and stuff and you read in it, clearly it's talking about having sex, okay, with a husband and wife, clearly. Now, another view is that this book is just symbolic, right? That the love between Solomon and his wife Shulamit, that love is symbolic, referring to God's love for Israel, in the Old Testament, or jump to the New Testament. It was prophetic of Jesus and how Jesus, and Jesus' bride is the church and how much he loved the church, right? And of course, we know that the church is the bride of Christ, right?
Seems like quite a stretch.
Yes! It seems like quite a stretch. Yeah. When you're reading all this erotic stuff in there, this is not the church and Jesus. That's wow. But people who are embarrassed by, how much, sex descriptions and body descriptions and all that stuff, they want to feel more comfortable saying, oh, it's just an allegory of God and Israel and how much he loves. Yeah, no. No. If you read the white papers, you'd join me in saying no, right? And then thirdly, it's simply the story of Solomon falling in love with his first girlfriend, who became his first wife, Shulamit. Okay, and it's Hebrew, right? So sometimes you might see somebody say Shulamit or Shulamith. Yeah, okay, so same thing. And by the way, this name, Shulamit, is the same name as Shuleman, as Solomon, but one is the masculine version and the other is the feminine version. So it's like, when Pat marries Pat. Patrick marries Patricia. Okay, so they're both, it's the masculine and the feminine. It's the same name, okay, which is very interesting. I don't know if it means anything, but anyway, that's the deal there. Okay, so those are the three, and actually you could divide this up into four, right? So either it's talking about marital love, sexual love, or it's talking about God and Israel, and a symbolism, or Jesus and the church, or it's just the story of Solomon falling in love, getting married. All right? Good. Now there are some characters in the story, as you know, and first it starts off with Solomon. Solomon, the young king, the son of David. He's taken over for his father, David, who's been the greatest king that Israel has ever had. And it's great. Now, even though he has 40 wives, according to the book, it's important to note that these wives were wives of his father David, in that harem, and so he inherited them. So they basically are just women living in the palace now. All right? They weren't lovers, they weren't wives in our understanding of the term at all. I feel sorry for these women. Women in general back in every culture, thousands of years ago. So, but this is him actually meeting and falling in love with a woman. And who is she? Well, she's Shulamit or Shulamith. All right? And who is she? Well, they're the palace. The royalty owned lands and farms and chariot barns and stuff and vineyards. And so this was a vineyard owned by the king, and the vineyard keeper has a lovely daughter. And when Solomon goes away for a week of vacation or something, and he goes to the vineyard, he meets this lovely girl. She and her brothers are out, maybe helping, working in the vineyard. We don't know the details, but he meets her there. That's who she is. All right? He meets her, they fall in love. Everybody said, "Aww." And then third, there are friends that are referenced, right? He speaks and she speaks, and then the friends speak, right? So throughout the book, Solomon speaks, Shulamit speaks, then the friends sing. Now, they're not in the bedroom. It's not like it's the wedding night and Solomon and Shulamith come together and then the choir goes, hallelujah. It's not what's happening here, okay? It's just part of the literature. It's a literary thing. We saw things like anthropomorphism last week in the Proverbs. This is poetry. So it's a term like, here's the chorus is sung by the friends, who are happy. They're not there in the bedroom. Just to alleviate your concern. I know many of you, no, you weren't upset at all, were you? You didn't even think about it. All right, it's a literary device used to help us grasp the importance of the words being spoken. And then everybody said, hallelujah. All right? Good. So those are the characters. Now, this is an interesting thing. The structure of the book, and I mentioned this briefly last week, just so that hopefully as you read through it, you would get a bit of an idea of what's going on. This is, in Hebrew, it's called a chiasm, okay? I'm not pronouncing that right, but as close as I can get. A chiasm, and it's when a story is told forward, and then it's told backward, all right? The story is told twice. Now, what did we say about Hebrew poetry already? It's always, two channels, two thoughts. You say it twice. And for these are longer, and you say it forward, and then you say it backward, okay? So A, B, C, D, and then you say D, C, B, A. Let me give you an example, all right? Something we know, we all know. Humpty Dumpty sat on a wall. Humpty Dumpty had a great fall. All the king's horses and all the king's men, help me here, couldn't put Humpty together again. Okay, so if this was a chiasm, if this was, this kind of Hebrew poetry, now you've said it forward, right? Now you would say it backwards, all right? It's a shame that all those people who came together couldn't put Humpty Dumpty back together. They all came together to try. It's just so terrible that he fell from that wall. Why did he sit on that wall in the first place? Do you see? Told forwards, then tell it backwards. And so that's what happens. And there are lots of there's Hebrew literature like this, obviously not just over centuries, but over millennia. And so the Song of Songs is like that. As a matter of fact, here's what I want you to do. There's extra pages here. Okay, so turn to page 65. If you're at home, hopefully you've got the notebook there, because let's just walk through it, and you'll see what I mean here. Okay, page 65. So this will be a good explanation of it because it just captures the whole thing. So number one, you have the beloved. Now the beloved is the wife, okay, and the lover is the husband. The beloved is Shulamith. The lover is Shulamon, Solomon, right? So it starts with her introductory song. She's not kept her own vineyard, which is Carmi Shelley, Natar. Her brothers and the friends are mentioned. She compares her lover to an apple tree, Tapua, in whose shade she would repose. She desires him to kiss her, to bring her into the house of wine. It ends with the refrain, disturb not love till it pleases, which means don't bother us till we're done. Till we're pleased, okay? So, which would be, their honeymoon night. So you get that. That's the first chapter and into chapter 2. But notice some of the things there, right? Under the apple tree, the brothers, the friends, that kind of stuff, right? So that's one. And 2 is her song about how her lover Solomon invites her to the countryside where nature is alive and it's in spring splendor, and they're going out for a walk and they're going to enjoy the country. That's great. But notice that, part 2, because it's all going to be backwards later. Part 3, the beloved, Shulamith, describes her yearning for her absent lover. Solomon is gone. Maybe he's gone back to Jerusalem, back to the palace. He's got business of state to take care of, and she misses him. This is also tied together with the theme of the absent lover and seeking her lover, and the watchman, and the charge to the daughters of Jerusalem. It mentions her heart, all these in this section. And then 4, he admires her body. So Solomon speaks here and talks about how he loves the body God's given her. And again, this is also tied with the description of her body from the top down. So he describes her body, from the top down. And later, when we're going backwards, he describes her body, can you guess? From her feet up. Because it's backwards in that case, all right? And this is where he describes the beauty of her body from her feet up later. And the words, how beautiful, it talks about how her breasts are like twin fawns of a gazelle. It ends with mutual expressions of desire for each other. They see each other, they love each other, they're husband and wife, and they want each other. All right, and then we get to chapter 5, and that's the center of this poem, and then it goes backwards from there. And the center is this phrase, eat, O friends, and drink, drink, drink your fill, O lovers. All right, so it's already kind of a little bit of a turn there. And then we go backwards. So the next section is how, again, he admires her body, this time from her feet up, it's backwards. And then 4, 3, 2, 1. He describes his yearning for her to return so that he can see her beauty again. Okay, and again, they were going to head off as she had been yearning for him when he was gone. Now he's yearning for her. It's reversed. Number 2, she sings this song about her invitation to Solomon to come with her to the countryside where it's springtime. Now, does that look like number 2 above? Yeah, exactly. It's the same thing. We've come to it again. And then number 1 again, but at the end, it's the closing song, and she has kept her garden, but now she gives it freely to Solomon. So you can guess what the word garden means there. She's kept it pure. She's been a virgin, and now she gives herself to him. It's their wedding night. Her brothers and friends are mentioned. She rouses her lover under the apple tree again, the tapua. And by the way, apples were considered aphrodisiacs then too, so that's all part of it. Okay, everybody get the idea? A chiasm. It's going forwards, and then we hit the peak, and then we retell it backwards. Okay, everybody good? So far? I'm not embarrassed if you're not. Although I do think that's why some people are not here tonight. I'm kidding.
Why is this section important?
Why is it important?
We're skipping through many books in the Bible. Why have you chosen this one?
Because it's one of the books of the Bible, and that's what this one's all about. So we're going to talk at least a little bit about every book, and so this is what this book's about. So that's why we're talking about it.
I wouldn't miss tonight for the world.
Okay, very good. Wouldn't miss tonight for the world. All right, good. All right, so what's the story? Okay, a couple of parts of the story. I appreciate that. Okay, a couple parts of the story here. Number 1, Solomon's king. He goes away for a little R&R, a little rest and relaxation over a long weekend. And where does he go? He goes to this vineyard, right? And he goes to a vineyard that he owns. If you're in the States, there's Camp David, which is outside of Washington, D.C. It's a retreat. And often, here, what is it, Mount Royal? Is that what it's called? Where's the place that our prime ministers kind of have their out off into the Laurentians where, is it Mount Royal? What's it called?
He usually goes to somebody's yacht.
That's true. That's true. Okay, we won't get into that. So he goes away to a place that's owned by the state, owned by the king in that case, right, the monarchy. And there he meets the vineyard keeper's daughter, Shulamit. We talked about that. Number 3, the two of them fall in love. Soon Solomon brings her to Jerusalem and they marry. Now this is all mixed up in there, as you read it. And again, half it's forwards and half it's backwards. So you put that all together and that's what's happening. Okay, he's young. He is single, newly the king, so he's got all these older women who were his dad's wives and not his, okay? And so he goes, he meets this young, beautiful woman, they fall in love, he brings her to Jerusalem, they get married, and then we're told of their wedding night, and we're told what it is to be madly and sexually in love with one another as husband and wife. So it's graphic, but it's not smutty, because this is husband and wife and sex that God created and God gave for that purpose. So, yeah. All right. Ready to go on? Okay. And then the story is told in reverse. As we know, as we've seen. All right? Now, that's the basic outline of the book right there. And again, as we looked at, page 65, we read through more of the details and how, so that we could see, what stuff kind of went in where on the way up and what stuff went on the way down, and they kind of match too. Now, again, I already said this is a bit of a repeat on the next page, page 64. Okay, there are 4 basic methods of interpreting the book as an allegory of God and Israel. And there's there's definitely a truth about how much God loves Israel. There is chosen people. I'll be your God, you be my people, for sure, but not in the way this book is. My goodness, no. And then, of course, it's also prophecy, prophetic, looking ahead to today, to the New Testament days. It's an allegory of Christ and his church. When God says we are the bride of Christ, the church is the bride of Christ, and he loves us. Ephesians 5, he loved the church and gave himself for the church there on the cross. Okay? But is that what the book is meaning? Not so sure. It's a wedding song to be used in weddings, of course. Lots of Jewish weddings will have parts of this, if not the whole thing, that they look at. And then finally, it's a manual of married love. You look in it and you read it and you see what's being said. And just to be blunt, I mean, it talks about sex, it talks about oral sex, it talks about all kinds of stuff in the book. Again, if you know what you're reading, and you'd have to be Jewish, you'd have to read Hebrew to really get it all. But that's what the pages are for you to have a look at. Okay, good. Everybody got this down? Ready to move on? Okay, so a few key thoughts of the book, some interesting tidbits here in the book. First, Solomon refers to Shulamith as his garden. Okay, and we noticed that already. He refers to her as his garden. Where's my... All right? Now, the Hebrews often had gardens attached to their houses with a wall around it. Now, in your notes... Okay, in your notes there on page 64, you'll see a little outline there on the side. So the garden was at the back of the house, and often there was a wall around it, and there wasn't an external way to get to that garden. You had to go through the house to get to the garden there. And the idea is, of course, it's protected from the outside. Nobody would consider going in and violating that person's garden. And so the same is true, for the woman, for the wife. Okay, this is a play on words referring to her virginity. There's some play on words on some of the sexual organs, saying that she's his garden, she's his wife, and should not be violated. Nobody goes in there. All righty? So that's very interesting stuff. Again, just like some of the gardens and the houses there, protected from the outside, neighbors wouldn't consider violating it by going in. All right. So that's interesting. Another interesting tidbit is the description of their bodies that you see 3 times, right? Twice Solomon is describing his wife, from the head down and then the backwards part, from the feet up. And she describes him too at one point as well. All right? And, okay. Turn the page to see a literalist view, a literalist drawing of what Solomon describes. You see it? Page 66. If what he is describing is literally the way he describes it, there's her neck that's a tower, and her breasts are 2 fawns. One's a little perkier than the other, but sorry, I shouldn't have said that. No. Bad, Brian. Bad. And her nose is like a tower as well, and her hair is like the sheep. You know what? I'll read it. You look. Okay, chapter 4. It's off around the left too, but you can look and compare. How beautiful you are, my darling. Oh, how beautiful. Your eyes behind your veil are doves. Do you see the doves? Okay. Your hair is like a flock of goats descending Mount Gilead. Honey, would that be a compliment if I said that about you? Your hair is like a flock of goats descending Mount Gilead. Your teeth are like a flock of sheep just shorn. I guess that would be pretty white. Coming up from the washing, each has its twin. Not one of them is alone. Well, that's nice when each of the teeth has its twin still there. That's another good thing, he says, right? You don't see the teeth, though, or her lips. Okay, sorry. Your lips are like a scarlet ribbon. Your mouth is lovely. Your neck is like the Tower of David, built with elegance. On it hang 1,000 shields. You see the shields at the bottom? All of them shields of warriors. Your 2 breasts are like 2 fawns, like twin fawns of a gazelle that browse among the lilies. Until the day breaks and the shadows flee, I will go to the mountain of myrrh and to the hill of incense. Stop. All beautiful you are, my darling. There is no flaw in you. Come with me from Lebanon, my bride. Come with me from Lebanon. Descend from the crest of Amana, from the top of Senir, the summit of Hermon. That's the biggest mountain in Israel. It's actually snow-covered all year round, way up in the north. Okay, from the lion's dens and the mountain haunts of the leopards. You have stolen my heart, my sister, my bride. She's not literally his sister. That's just, she's so close. They've become so close already. She's like a sister to him in their closeness. My sister, my bride. How much more pleasing is your love than wine? And the fragrance of your perfume than any spice. Okay, and then if we went to the bottom up, as we go backwards, chapter 7, how beautiful your sandaled feet, O prince's daughter. Your graceful legs are like jewels, the work of a craftsman's hands. Your navel is a rounded goblet that never lacks blended wine. Your waist is a mound of wheat encircled with lilies. I guess that's a compliment. Your breasts are like two fawns, twins of a gazelle, and again, on it goes. Back up from the feet up. So very interesting stuff. And I don't think she actually looked at all like that picture, do you? But just fun to see that. Somebody drew that. If the flock of goats and the tower neck and the shields below. Wow. All right. So in chapter 4, we just read it. He describes her, his bride. They're married. From her head down, and then chapter 7 from her feet up. And in chapter 5, she's describing him and his body, what she loves about his body as she's looking at that. And again, we just looked at that literalist view on page 66 there. So, all good. All right, so the description of their bodies. That's kind of an interesting thing here in this book. I think this is interesting too. The little foxes, all right, chapter 2, verse 15. Let me read it here. Hang on a sec. Got papers everywhere. She says this. She says, catch for us the foxes, the little foxes that ruin the vineyards, our vineyards that are in bloom, she says. So in orchards, and remember, she is a vineyard keeper's daughter, so she knows about this, and I'm sure that's why she's using this analogy. The basic enemy to the grapes would have been little foxes that would come in and steal and ravage the grapes. Okay? So basically she's saying here that there are little foxes in their relationship that are beginning to steal their joy. Just little things that crop up, right? And that's the way it often works in a marriage, this little thing and you overlook it and this little thing and then they build up and there's like 10 things and So she's saying they're like little foxes that come and steal away your joy, steal away those little things. Very interesting. Little foxes that come and steal away the joy. True. And they haven't even been married very long. All right, got that? Then, another one of the key thoughts is the raisins and apples. And you see this, again, a number of places throughout the book because apples and raisins were considered by the Hebrews to be aphrodisiacs. Not just the Hebrews, but other of the people groups around them, saw them as being aphrodisiacs. Okay? In fact, if you look across the page, you want to test this out at home. Page 65, there's a recipe. We'll call it discipleship cake or Solomon and Shulamith loving cake. It's got apples and raisins in it. So you married couples, you try that out and let me know how that works. Question? An aphrodisiac is a potion, a pill, anything that gets your sexual gears going, okay? A stimulant, yes. A sexual stimulant. That's good. There are words I'm trying to avoid here tonight, so bear with me. Get you going, right? All right, good question. So try out the recipe, apples and raisins. No. Now again, this is very interesting. This is one that you can catch even in English. Well, no. Wait, yes and no. Okay. There's even here a position for lovemaking. Chapter 2, verse 6, it says, his left arm is under my head, and his right arm embraces me. No, it's not a hug. His right arm, the word is fondles. The more accurate Hebrew word is fondling. So left arm under my head, right arm not under my head. And so there's a position there. Apparently he's right-handed. I don't know. So that's interesting. That's there as well. Okay? So the word embrace does not mean to hold or hug, but it means to fondle there. All right? Am I turning red yet? No. For more details, there's a good book. I know a number of years ago, Roy Paul was taking this course, and then he taught it. And so he picked up this book, Solomon on Sex by Joseph Dillow. And that's actually one of the books where the 5 pages, the 3 sheets that I passed out on the white paper last week, get those. If you haven't read them, read them after this, and you'll see what we're talking about all these little innuendos and stuff. And so this book is one of the books that the author drew from as he put together that article that I passed out to you. Okay? So, that's it. Time left for you to pray with your prayer partner, but what questions do you have? What kind of things have you learned from these 2 little books? Not big books, 12 chapters in Ecclesiastes, 8 chapters, with kind of a doubling as it went forward then backwards here in Song of Songs. Any questions, comments, thoughts? Yes?
Well, I was just going to say, if you don't know Hebrew, you're not going to interpret any of that in Song of Songs and 8.
That's right.
I've read that book a number of times.
Yes.
I thought any of that stuff that I've read in the 3 sheets
Yes.
kind of blew me away.
Okay. Yeah. John's comment here is you can read it through in English once, twice, 3 times, and you never get any of this stuff because it's English and it just doesn't translate. You don't get the rhyming stuff and you don't understand, the way they looked at certain things back there. But if you read through those 5 pages, the 3 sheets, then it'll explain, just here's what this word meant, and here's what this word rhymes with, and here's what's happening in this part. And your eyes are, it's a whole different picture, isn't it? When you read it in Hebrew, and then you see all those things, or in this case, you're reading, these. I think he takes 3 different books, what I gave you, and just pulls the various things, including that book by Dillow.
Ron, your life has probably been full anyway.
Yes. He said, your life is probably full anyway without knowing all that. It's true. It's true. I didn't need to know all that stuff, but it's there. So, and in the Bible. Good. Anybody else? All right. Well, we've got time to pause and pray with your prayer partner if you can here tonight. So let me close. This is, we're going to take the next 2 weeks off, and then we'll come back on the 10th, and we may have a little quiz on the poetry books. I don't know. And we'll introduce Hebrew prophecy, and we'll look at what our Jewish friends consider the greatest prophecy book of all, Isaiah. All right, let's pray. Father, thanks so much. Very interesting stuff here tonight. And Lord, with Song of Songs, I'm glad to see that as you made us body, soul, and spirit. And thanks for love and the love that we see in this young couple and all that it includes. And that's great. Lord, we see, though, Solomon at the end of his life, and we're just so sad to see him say meaningless about so many things when he turned his back on you. But Lord, we're glad that at the end he says, hey, all you readers, remember God in your youth. Remember him now. And of course, the last verse is, fear God and keep his commandments. This is the summary. This is the end. Lord, I pray that we would do that. We would fear you in the sense of honor and love you and keep your commandments. Thank you, Father. Pray in Jesus' name. Amen.